The next session is something that's been touched on so much this morning and is absolutely integral to why we're here and what the benefits are of this route development, this connectivity. What is the catalytic impact? Exactly what is that? So it gives me absolute delight. Martin has been a massive supporter of AviaDev since inception. We work together. There's a flyer in your bag talking about the economic impact studies that we can offer as well. So allow me to invite Martin to the stage. He's going to set the scene, invite his panelists. So Martin, come join us.
I'd like to invite my panel up, and as I'm introducing him, I'd invite him to please come up. And as protocol dictates, we start with the Honourable Minister for the Western Cape, Minister of Economic Opportunities, Beverley Schäfer. Anyway, and then in no particular order, but we're going to take Rick last because he's one of those guys. Mike Collini, who's the Vice President for Development for Hilton Hotels. Matome Ramokgobedi, who's the Group Manager, Traffic Development for AXA. And then last, maybe not least, everybody knows him, Rick Taylor, CEO of the Business Tourism Company. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about quantifiable benefits. The reason we're talking about quantifiable benefits is, as John explained, there is this big hairy goal. And that big hairy goal is worth 29 billion rand. Dollars, I apologize, dollars, even better. Not Zim dollars, US dollars. Now, in terms of that goal, a lot of people can't really fathom in terms of when we say 29 billion US dollars, how much is that? Now, if you look at the GDP of African countries, $29 billion is more than 70%. 70% of the countries in Africa has got a GDP less than $29 billion. So just take that in for a moment in terms of when you're looking at an African context, how much that is and how big that is. So that's what we want to get across today is in terms of the potential that we're talking about and the size that we're talking about. Now, I did make my panel very nervous when I asked them to put some numbers to the things that they are going to be talking about. So please, we come with a disclaimer. We work the panel on the basis that we will be vaguely right rather than precisely wrong. So in terms of the numbers, it's ballpark figures. Please don't base your feasibilities on any of these. If you want feasibility work, come and talk to us afterwards. We'll get you more exact numbers. But we're talking ballpark figures because we want to demonstrate the value that there is. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about, I would like to start with the Honourable Minister. And the first question is to talk really from your perspective, because we've got from a more governmental perspective, a hotel perspective, an airport perspective, and more of an events perspective. So there's different elements in terms of what benefits can be realized when we're talking about this, this big hairy goal that we've got. So from your perspective, from a government perspective, those quantifiable benefits of a new air service, can you talk to us about that from your perspective?
So I think, firstly, we must understand that a new air service doesn't just bring in tourists, but it really brings in economic growth. We find that with the air access strategy that we've rolled out over the last couple of years, we've not only had an increase, obviously, in the numbers of tourists, but really an increase in the belly of the plane, as we so term it, which is about 52%. If you look at the American route that we're unlocking in December, remember we have the AGOA trade agreement with African countries, including South Africa. We're only utilizing about 2% of the AGOA agreement, and this hopefully will actually unlock further benefit into the America for us to take advantage of. I mean, it's 14,000 products that are duty-free into the States, and we're only utilizing 2%. 2%, yeah. So this is the opportunity for looking at it. And then at the same time, we've got the African Continental Free Trade Agreement going into Africa. We're almost ratifying that. And I imagine that all these flights will either unlock opportunity in terms of that trade, or the trade will unlock further flight opportunities?
Yeah. So looking far more than just the number of tourists arriving, looking at in terms of that trade facilitation and that greater growth. Now, Mike, from a hotel perspective, one of the things that we did do with this big hairy goal was do some calculations in terms of if we take the number of people flying to a destination, take how much would be returning passengers, take a kind of load factor, etc., size of a plane, and so on. We came up with a figure of, if we look in terms of hotel investments, and we worked on 54 countries. I know there's some debate in terms of whether it's 55 or 54, but we worked on 54. We look at another 194 billion in hotel investment. Now, from your perspective, from a hotel investment, maybe if you just talk in terms of what the average size of your hotels are in Africa, what the average development cost is per key, we get an idea in terms of how much a hotel development is and so on. It also adds up to quite a big number if air services can unlock a hotel in a particular destination.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We opened 2 airport hotels in Africa last year. The Legend Hotel at Lagos Airport, which is branded under our Curio by Hilton brand. It's positioned in the luxury segment, but also the Hilton Garden Inn at Nairobi Airport. Right. Now, so we've got the 2 key hubs in East and West Africa covered. I'll talk more about our airport strategy later. But if you take the Hilton Garden Inn product, this is positioned in the mid-market segment. It's a highly efficient hotel in terms of its construction economics, averaging just under 48 square meters per key, which for a mid-market hotel is highly efficient. And it's very cost-effective to operate. So that's really the core brand that we're looking to grow in Sub-Sahara. Now that hotel, we don't invest directly. We license our brands and we operate hotels. But we've costed that hotel at about $150,000 per key in terms of construction, excluding land and excluding finance. Yeah. So you're looking at a 30 million construction budget to produce a world-class mid-market brand. Times that by 20 to 25, that's where our strategy is to Sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah. We expect to grow that type of hotel in 20 to 25 hotels in the medium term.
Absolutely. And there's also operating, because surely you must source some of your supplies to that particular hotel from a local base.
Well, we've been, it's an exciting time for Hilton. We celebrate our 100th year next month. And 60 of those years have been in Africa. So we've been present on the continent for a long time. When the Nile Hilton opened, Hilton in Addis and Hilton in Nairobi are celebrating their 50th year. So we have that operating platform present on the continent. And what we're actually seeing, we're opening these Hilton Garden Inn brands, which I think is the real sweet spot for the market. We recently opened in Gaborone, we opened in Lusaka, we're opening in Swaziland. We're opening those hotels that are being staffed with local talent that we've nurtured through our system over the year, so that the return on a hotel comes just as much from the construction development as in the operating cost. And these are very, very cost efficient to operate.
And in terms of your typical hotels, how many people do you employ? Just to give us a
typical Hilton Garden Inn will probably be around 120 to 150, depending on the element of conference. Yeah. Because at airport hotels, we're adding a larger element of conference facilities.
All right. Excellent. Matome. Yes. There is a perception that AXA makes all the money from air services. Talk to us. You're the only guys that benefit.
Okay, morning everyone, and thank you, Martin. And it is true that obviously the perception is that airports take all the money, and that is far from the truth. If one looks at the direct operating cost for a new service into any airport. So what goes to the airport is not even a double digit. And it is for the service provided. We are a community, so within an airport, obviously, you find various players in ground handling. In our case, obviously, those services are outsourced to third parties. And now, obviously, what is the real benefit? It talks to job creation, the new services. So fuel suppliers, the civil aerospace, you need line maintenance to support the new services. So as an airport, obviously, we are not a tourism product. So a traveler does not travel because we have a beautiful airport. They travel because of this destination. So the product is destination, and you look at let's look at the seasonal service. United will be operating from December. So estimation, obviously, looking at 15,000 plus minus passengers into the local economy. So when you take the average tourist spends cited by our state South Africa and also SA Tourism, 10,000 rand, 8,000 rand, 10,000 rand per passengers, you're looking at least over 100 million in contribution. And when you look at what airport takes, we're going to collect for that seasonal flight less than 10 million rand. Mm-hmm. And then that excludes the cost, obviously, of providing that service. Right. So what's important is that if your destination, obviously, is attractive to travelers, they will come, irrespective of how bad your airport looks. So it's business travelers. You find business travelers traveling to destinations where they are obviously unfortunate instabilities, but you find business to travel there. So we are not the product. The product is the destination. We're just the integral part of the bigger economy.
Yeah. And you're very much in terms of an integral part, because if we look at the changing nature of airports these days, they're almost becoming shopping malls. They're becoming facilitators in terms of access, buses, trains, car rental, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of how important, maybe if you can put a percentage on it, is that at the moment, and how is that growing? Because the more passengers for an airport, the higher the retail spend, those type of things, because that also still flows into the local economy.
So if you look at the South African air travel market, for example, so what makes us resilient is that the majority of our travelers are local travelers. So the percentage of transfer traffic, even in bigger hubs such as Johannesburg, is still less than 10%. Mm-hmm. And you look at the next biggest port of entries, Cape Town and Durban, you're looking at less than 1% in transfer traffic. Mm-hmm. So majority of our travelers still local travelers, not transfer. So when you talk in terms of retail, obviously there are those that moves within provinces. You need a car to take you to your final destinations. No. But the question is, will you really spend much in terms of the retail within airport space? The answer is no and yes. But the reason I'm saying that there is normally when you travel, for example, yourself, chances are you don't spend much in terms of at our retail space, the duty free. As a business traveler, you'll go straight to the airport lounges and straight to your gate for departure. And on return, there isn't much interaction with your retail, except maybe on food and beverages.
So at the moment, in South Africa's case, not that much really in terms of contributing to the bigger picture. Small contribution at the moment.
True, but obviously outside the airport area, you look at car rentals. That's where obviously there is a greater use versus people maybe purchasing stuff from the duty free.
Yeah, excellent. Rick, when we talk about events and the contribution of events, and through research that I've done over the years, the conference delegates do spend more than actually even a business visitor. So from your perspective, in terms of your experience with events and how that can contribute with the improvement of air access and examples that you might have seen?
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think at the end of the day, categorically, it's all about return on investment, whatever it is, whether it's an airline, whether it's an airport, whether it's a hotel. And if you look at the MICE sector, the meetings, incentives, conferences, events, and exhibitions sector, the business events propeller, if you like. Globally, it's worth $1.3 trillion. What that sector is worth from an African perspective is $194 billion. So to reach that big, hairy, ambitious goal that John tabled earlier this morning, I do really feel it's not unachievable. And what can lead that drive specifically will be the business events category. Looping back now, Martin, to your question vis-a-vis the delegate spend, there is an international benchmark that measures this deliverable, and it's ICA, the International Congress and Comprising Association. Right. And from an African perspective, an international delegate to Africa spends $356 per person per day. So I did some quick numbers. If there are, I'm not sure how many delegates are right here at the AviaDev conference, but let's say there are 200. I looked at the list earlier this morning, and there are loads of wonderful people from all over the world, so warm welcome to Cape Town to you all. This event is going to contribute $384,000 to this economy over the next 4 days. Yeah. Just taking 200 delegates here for 4 days, spending $350 per person per day, and that ends up at, and that's just the direct impact, and doesn't necessarily take the multiply effect into place. The other thing, just to add to the conversation and the thinking, is that arguably, I think the business events sector in the tourism space is perhaps undervalued, or it's not quite fully comprehended from a continental point of view. I think South Africa has done a great job. You know, I know Bradley's in the audience somewhere, and he'll be paying for dinner tonight. So, you know, they've done a great job with their National Convention Bureau. Similarly, Cape Town with the Cape Town Convention Bureau. And as Africa starts to appreciate the efficacy and the impact of this sector, you're getting convention bureaus now that have happened in Rwanda. They're up and running, and that's maybe we can loop back, and there's a lovely little case study there. Economically, we can unpack. Uganda has just come to the marketplace with their National Convention Bureau, so that in itself is absolutely electric, and the airliner is in town, or certainly was in town. So I think the whole business events component, that propeller, as we were saying, has enormous opportunity, and will make a terrific contribution to that big, hairy, ambitious goal that was put on the table a little earlier this morning.
And you mentioned Rwanda, and that's one of the countries that you've been integrally involved in terms of setting up the Convention Bureau, and that lovely convention center that has been built there. Now, if you look at just in terms of Rwanda, they're well known in terms of photogorillas, in terms of go to gorilla viewing, but that's limited to 80 people a day. Now, if we add up 80 people a day, let's say they operate 365, and then we look at the events side, which has got no limit in terms of how many people can be done. That can very easily then eclipse one of the key things that they're actually well known for. And as you say, it's maybe undervalued in terms of the potential that the events, the MICE sector can bring to that country.
Absolutely. So if you look at Rwanda, it's kind of beyond gorillas, because that is kind of pretty one-dimensional. And the country has, in itself, big, hairy, ambitious goals. And when we talk and when we do our strategies for these destinations, I always ask the Minister of Tourism, sir or madam, would you like another $200-300 million coming into your GDP? And so, yeah, that's very nice, but how do we do this? So obviously the vehicle or the institutional arrangement is the Convention Bureau. So Rwanda, Colette, my better half, and I went into the country 5 years ago, and there was absolutely nothing, or very little, let me rephrase that, beyond gorillas. And just looking at the landscape, I'm just thinking of AviaDev. John came in The Africa Hotel Investment Forum came in as event organizers. And the first Marriott hotel in Africa opens its doors in Kigali. So this year, there's $237 million going into that economy that was not there 5 years ago. With that came the downstream investment strategy, job creation, which is always key and fundamental in whatever it is that we all, certainly in tourism, aspire to. And just from coming back to, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you look at the ICA rankings, Rwanda 5 years ago was not on the charts. It went to 21st, and last year it's now number 3 as a meetings destination in Africa. From nowhere, so do we dare say from sort of 0 to hero over a short period of time. So of course now it comes back to sustainability, keeping that momentum, and keeping that economic propeller turning, and keeping that particular aircraft at high altitude.
Great stuff. Okay, I'd like to move on to enabling factors. And Minister, I'm going to be asking you last because some of these things might be where you be able to play a role. But I would like to, from each one of your perspectives, in terms of your business, what's going to be the enabling factors to make your business grow? What do you need in order to build more hotels in Africa?
So apart from air connectivity, I mean, economic growth, air connectivity, and hotel performance are all very highly correlated. We review charts over the years, and any movement in GDP, any movement in arrivals has a direct relationship to a hotel performance. In terms of enabling factors, I mean, apart from more routes and more connectivity in Africa, I think from our side, it's ease of access. We've seen that on a global basis, and countries that just slightly tweak their visa entry regime has a massive impact on arrivals. It's a mixed bag in Africa. East Africa is still very accessible. Visa on arrival, nobody really complains about $50 in and out. But West Africa is still a hurdle, and it's still very difficult to attract Western visitors into those markets. So I think that's the big area for improvement. Moving on from that, ease of access, it's seamless travel. It's just an arrival experience and a departure experience. And if we can get to where Senegal and Dakar and their new airport terminal is, I mean, for me, that's one of the most smoothest and most professional experiences I've had for many, many years. So they're really some of the key issues from our side.
All right. From an airport's perspective, I know you guys get criticized if there's not enough Home Affairs staff to process visas. You get kind of lumped with that kind of criticism. So from your perspective, in terms of how to make the airport grow, yes, there's more flights and so on, but is there other factors, other enabling factors?
Thank you, Martin. Obviously, beside the obvious that we need more airlines, but also it's important to have a thriving economy that talks to growing middle class, that obviously will have more travelers. And also collaboration is key, collaborations amongst key stakeholders. So obviously we have various agencies within the tourism sphere. Also we like them to take a leading role. And other than that, obviously, other than collaborations, we need to look at, have a regional view instead of just focus on South Africa. Because obviously our offering goes beyond just the borders of South Africa. And if we can, in a long term, be able to be one integrated market within the region of Southern Africa, as an example, that obviously talks to our long-term sustainability.
Because your collaboration does touch on a number of government departments. As I said, if Home Affairs hasn't got enough people to testify, you get if you've got a problem in terms of with roads, in order to get in and out of the airport precinct, you know, it never minds how it's inside a precinct, if it's just outside, you again get criticized. So you guys have really got a tough job in terms of collaborating with various other people that makes your life better, easier.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously our relationship with various agencies are better in other provinces than others. And we are obviously through our key leaders in various provinces making good progress in trying to work closely together with those agencies, obviously for the betterment of our country and also of safe and reliable facilitation of goods, people through our airports.
Yeah, 100%. Rick,
Yeah,
from my perspective?
Just to add that, Martin, the convention bureaus in Africa are, I was going to say are trending, but they're not. But there is that opportunity. Once governments across the continent appreciate the value of the convention bureau. Yes, it is a destination marketing organization per se, but it is a lot more in the 21st century. I mean, any industry that can attract 200 people or 2,000 people or 10,000 people to a destination that might not have necessarily been coming to that destination.
And might be coming back.
Well, the trick is absolutely to get them back, which I'll loop back to your earlier opening comments. I mean, there are 200 people here. Many are here because of this conversation, because of this particular event. And had we done some research, people, you know, first of all, in terms of research terms, where would you like to go on holiday next? People may say Cape Town, they may say South Africa, they could say Rwanda, they could say Uganda, they could say Togo, they could say Morocco. But if that leisure visitor actually gets there, that is another conversation. But from an events perspective, people are here, and there's investment going into the economy categorically, and the trick is now to get them to come back. Now, depending on how sexy and attractive the destination is at the end of the day, which comes back to the marketing pillar, you know, research illustrates that conventions, up to 17% of delegates, if they're going to South Africa, 17% will bring a significant other husband, wife, or whatever. And of those people, 38% generally do a pre or post tour. Yeah. So those numbers back again a little earlier, I think are totally pragmatic and absolutely doable. Yeah. So big, hairy, ambitious goals, bring them on, bring in the convention bureaus, get the comprehension of the government, get good ministers who understand that. And again, coming back to, you know, people may ask, why was Rwanda so successful? The top got it. Yeah. The man at the top understood it. Yeah. And it just happened.
When it happened.
And once that light comes on, the dollars start to flow and the growth. Hotels come in, airport, you know, airport growth, airport investment, bigger airports, bigger planes, more routes, more hotels. And so the whole, as I said, the propeller just...
Yeah. Yeah. Minister, that brings it back to you in terms of, from a government perspective, there's really certain things that need to be facilitated, there's regulations that need to be addressed, all of those kind of elements. And, you know, from your perspective, the enabling factors that you've heard here, advances that has been made, any particular progress there?
So, Martin, I think really our most, you know, our real blockage to maximizing tourism in South Africa is our visa regulations. And so it starts with regulation. It really is a case in point that sometimes they just don't get it. For us, it's absolutely the most important thing. I mean, tourism is one of our key economic focus sectors. We took on 3. Tourism was one of them, because we understand that tourism is a low entry, easy entry into unskilled job opportunities. 300,000 people, direct and indirect, are employed in tourism. How do we up that number? So we're busy with the tourism master plan at the moment, and the questions that we're really asking is, how do we increase that one more day of stay, particularly with the business tourism, how do we bring more international tourists and how do we combat the seasonality? And I mean, visas are definitely a bone of contention. They are absolutely inhibiting in every way. Around us once being known as a family tourist destination, we now have unabridged birth certificates, and although they've been relaxed, the legislation has changed one word from you must have to you may need to have, and that doesn't work with airline industries. They need certainty in order to allow people on board. And then I think really the unique product offering, as Rick was saying, is very, very important. How do you get, because we're a long-haul destination, how do we really enable a unique product offering? Because we know that the risk, for example, in the US flight, it's a risk. It's a calculated risk in terms of cost. It's long haul. We know that the airline is taking a risk, and we need to show that distinct value proposition that is different from the rest of the markets. So, we want to put tourism on steroids, and the question really is, what is it that we need to do in order to achieve that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, excellent.
But maybe if I can just pick up on that point that Minister is sharing, Martin. Tourism, I think we'll all agree, is like, it's the most competitive industry in the entire world. It is really, I don't know how many destinations there are out there, but there are thousands. And we are fighting with every other destination, whether it's Cape Town, whether it's Western Cape, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Africa, whatever. And there's a dollar out there, and WTTC have got, it's worth trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. So how do we make our destinations, our clients, more attractive to magnetize that FDI, that foreign direct investment? And that's, we mustn't make it more difficult. We've got to make it easier going into the future. I mean, you saw that video a little earlier about what is happening from an airport perspective in the year 2030 or 2035. It's so competitive, whether it's airlines, hotels, countries. We have to get our game up. And just quickly, when it comes to airports, and in Africa, we all do a lot of work in Africa, one of the easier, or one of the lower hanging fruits is get the airport experience right. It might be the visa. I mean, we go into airports, Colette and I go into these airports, east, west, north, and south. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And we talk to ministers, yeah, but you go there a month later or 3 months later, nothing's changed. So we also, this conversation is terrific, but we've got to change things. We need that ownership to make it happen, don't we?
Can I just? I'd just like to touch on that point and disagree with Axa slightly, because I think our first touch point is the Cape Town International Airport.
Not maybe South Africa so much as
but it's very
Africa.
important, and although you may have said that it's the destination that attracts, it's the first touch point is the airport, and we're very proud of our airport. I mean, I have favorite airports in the world that I prefer going to, and ones that I absolutely dread flying through. So I think that's a very important first experience. How you get through the airport, and that ease of moving through the airport is the first experience of how you perceive a destination.
Yeah,
and your last experience.
And your last.
Yeah, it makes you want to return.
That's true.
Yeah, that's the thing. In terms of the perception of a destination can very easily be ruined by your last experience that you have at the destination. I do, however, in terms of from an African perspective and the number of airports, I'm sure that I don't have the numbers close at hand, but the number of airports that are being upgraded.
Yeah.
You can see that in terms of, I'm particularly talking of Addis, that's being upgraded, and the experience there is definitely improving and increasing. And the reason for that is air access. There's more and more flights going through. So more and more flights going through various airports will lead to that improved experience, that inflow of money, that improvement in terms of the facilities, growing of airports. So that big, hairy goal, that's what we wanted to demonstrate. It's got all of these trickle-down effects that hasn't necessarily just been included in that big, hairy goal. There's lots that sits below it.
And as we go downstream, we all talk about ROI, return on investment, of course, and ROE, return on experience, or ROX, return on experience. And these are key, certainly from an events point of view. Yeah. If I go to a certain destination, or I have a meeting, an association that is being bid for, that experience, that airport, that whole value chain will be taken into consideration before that meeting planner says, right, AviaDev says, right, Cape Town, you have the meeting for the next year or so.
Right,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
Right, this is the audience participation part of the panel. So if there's any questions that you'd like to raise with the panel, I'm sure there will be roving mics. Unfortunately, the lights are a bit heavy, so I can't see exactly who they are, but if you're pointed out, you can wave your hand and we can find you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Mark Danneke from ATR. Vested interest in this question to the panel, but ecotourism, we see this globally as a huge issue. In Scandinavia, people are apologizing for flying. So it's something that will gradually descend across Europe, and it will hit Africa. So wanted to hear the panel's views on the importance of ecotourism, emissions, of course, in terms of aviation development. Thank you.
Anyone who would like to take that on? I've got my personal views, but...
In terms of the hotel opportunity, I mean, it's part of our strategy. We see our brands being extended to cover a wide variety of uses, such as safari lodges and wineries and resorts. And I think Africa is just at the very start of all of this. There is so much potential right across the continent. I mean, I think you have to separate South Africa from Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Africa does do a lot of good things in terms of, its tourism structure, and I think there's so much to learn for the rest of the continent.
No.
But the opportunity from a hotel and touristic perspective is absolutely huge. We're still at the very, very start.
If I also understand your question correctly, you said in terms of people almost apologizing for flying. So in terms of, just to understand, because there is a trend, and that the world is becoming more environmentally conscious, and because of flights, and because of the so-called, the pollution and so on, people don't want to travel long haul. Is that what you're talking about?
It's everything, Martin. I mean, if you take the context of our aircraft, we're studying electrical hybrid futures. The technology for electric aircraft is not there. It will not be here for another 15 to 20 years. If we were to make our aircraft electric, we need a 20-ton battery to fly it. Where's that going to go? You're going to tow another airplane along? It's a nonsense, and regrettably, the political wave is naively jumping on this bandwagon. If you saw what happened, with the volcano that erupted in Europe and aviation stopped, business stopped, tourism stopped, everything stopped. So to us, it's not the way to go. We think the environmental footprint is hugely important, and as I say, we have a vested interest because we have the greenest aircraft on the market. But I think it's something, in terms of touching upon your points, Rick, and where can you focus to differentiate. You want the top dollar tourism coming, the Scandinavians, you touch that point, you're going to have a huge advantage. So I think it's really encouraging you to open your minds and see what's coming around the corner.
Could I reply to that? I'm taking a little bit of prerogative here as the panel facilitator. Is that in my experience, I serve on the national board of SATSA, who represents the inbound tourism industry in South Africa. And one of the things that we have been hearing from our foreign tour operators is that, in a particular case, is animal interactions, which is big in South Africa. You can ride an elephant, you can walk with a lion, you can pet a cheetah, that these are becoming highly controversial, particularly because of things like canned lion hunting. What happens to that little lion once it grows up and you can't walk with it anymore? And unfortunately, there are cases where it then goes into the canned lion industry. What we've done as SATSA is to take the initiative in order to start the process to talk to our members in terms of a set of guidelines. Now, that guidelines look at what the European guidelines are set, but what we are aiming to do is to come up with an African solution for Africa. With due respect to, in terms of from a Western perspective, the situation is a little bit different in terms of in Africa and how animals are being perceived and how the interaction with animals are being perceived. But what we're trying to do, and it speaks to that kind of responsible tourism element, is in order to come up with our own set of guidelines in order to do things responsibly. And it might not be to the standard, but it's starting to get there. And I think it's the same in terms of any of the other elements. In Africa, we've got the opportunity to set our own guidelines, and as you say, we need to get ahead of the curve. We need to do it for ourselves. We cannot be prescribed by other people because we've got our own set of situation here. And what works for us, and then if it works for the rest of the world, they will be more than happy to come here. Sorry, just my 5 cents worth.
Martin,
Any other questions?
Yeah, if I can just come in there, I think it links to the responsible tourism, in which we, I think, are doing pretty well in South Africa, and just the stories around the water crisis that we have, and how the hotels had wonderful, innovative ideas around tourists feeling very guilty arriving in South Africa or arriving in the Western Cape and feeling like they were going to use local water. And take water away from local people. And so those innovative ideas about, well, if you stay for the week and we can get you, you can buy so many hundreds of liters of water and we'll make sure it gets delivered. Or so there's that interaction, it's that communication, it's that hotel that actually takes up the initiative to ensure that we are managing our resources responsibly. It's the communication strategy behind it. And I think that we're doing pretty well in terms of that. And I mean, I haven't quite heard people are finding that they don't want to fly because of the carbon footprint. I understand that, but there are other innovative ways that you can use to counteract the carbon footprint. So the question really is, what is government offering to tourists to say, well, we know you've had a long-haul flight. Well, these are the options that you can take on to minimize your carbon footprint in the country.
Absolutely. And we also found during the water crisis that, particularly from a hotel perspective, they were ahead of the curve in terms of energy conservation, water conservation, because it made economic sense. So in terms of, there were a lot of them that already had the various water-saving measures in place. Right.
But I think there is an airline that for each passenger flown, they plant a tree. So it's sort of taking deserts and making them forests.
There's opportunities for the airlines in this as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions, John?
Okay. I'm just thinking as well, Martin, just while you're looking out there, sort of responsible tourism, sustainability, and all those great things. In Kenya, you had a team who made a dhow out of plastic, out of recycled sort of plastic bottles and stuff, and they sailed this boat all the way down the coast. And did it come to Cape Town? I think, I think they were sort of kind of heading this way.
Yeah.
But so
great way to raise awareness.
Precisely. Yeah. Of course, hotels now into plastic straws and
we've removed straws from our hotels and plastic bottles globally.
That's
Hi, Yvette from Dronamics. Want to shift the discussion in a bit of a different direction, maybe. Just want to say that totally on board with the more connectivity we have in Africa, more trade, more developing the economics and so on. But kind of wondering, what are you doing in terms of the world's perspective of Africa in terms of safety and security? Myself and my colleagues have recently started traveling for business in Africa, and it's a big concern of where we could actually go and develop our business opportunities. So kind of wanted to hear your point on this. Thank you.
All right. Maybe if we start with you, Minister.
Yes, I think, and we talk about this all the time, of course. Our biggest stumbling block at the moment is where tourism is seen as an outside thing to the local people. And I think the case in point with Rwanda and the gorillas is around bringing in the local community to understand the value of tourism and where tourism directly benefits the lives of people. And we need to do a lot more work on that. It's always seen on the outside, and we need to get people to understand how it actually impacts right down to grassroots level. And I think until we do that, we're going to have crime problems and safety issues. People see it as a target rather than as a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it is quite a mixed bag across the continent. Every new market we go into, we undertake a thorough risk mitigation plan, and obviously safety and security is very high there. What we're seeing, take Nairobi in the recent attack back in January, you know, what we're seeing in Africa, unlike the Western markets, is unfortunately terrorism is a fact of life these days, but the African markets take a long time to bounce back. And the Nairobi market is still in a very much a long recovery phase. That's unfortunately just the nature of what it is. So unfortunately the perception is there, and yeah, everyone has to work hard together, governments, security forces, you know, to improve that perception.
And from an AXA perspective, security is quite a high.
Yes, it is. We work very closely with various law enforcement agencies, but more importantly, we make an effort to empower the communities within which we operate. And even though we're still a long way to go, you see in some of our communities, there is that embracement, appreciation of visitors because they know the value they add, and also the interaction and supporting small businesses. So in all our airports, obviously, we are an integral part of law enforcement agencies, and we understand that we have a responsibility as a company to contribute towards the communities within which we operate, to also assist in alleviating the scourge of poverty. And some of the residents, obviously, within our communities work at Airport Company South Africa, and we also do some of community works in sponsorship and also in various schools.
You know, I think that's really a great question, and certainly when it comes to the event sector in which we are immersed, this is put on the table all the time. Africa and safety, and it's, you know, perception is reality, right? I mean, this is, if you don't think it's very safe here, well, it's not very safe. You know, how safe is it to go to Paris right now, or to London, or to anywhere else in the world? But I think it comes back to the DMO, the destination marketing components, and remembering that absolutely everything communicates. We work very closely with many, many ministers, and we always say to the ministers, be careful what you say, because and presidents, of course, because that tone of voice or that messaging goes on via CNN, via BBC, and you know, to try and remedy that. There isn't a country in the world that has enough dollars to remedy mismessaging from a PR point of view. So it's everybody having ownership, changing that perception. Perception is reality. And I mean, again, you know, Cape Town, Minister, is the murder capital of Africa. Like, really? Yeah, well, the numbers illustrate that. And it might be a certain part of town that needs policing and controlling. But Cape Town, I hope all of you felt absolutely safe here. But that is the perception, or maybe in that instance, not even a perception, it's a fact somewhere. How do we overcome that? How do we dilute that? And that's
It's all about information, because what adds to that statistic in terms of murder is that the majority of the murders happens with somebody that you know. So you actually get murdered by somebody that you know. So be careful who you trouble with. That's basically the bottom of it. Can we take one last question before we wrap up?
Thank you, John. My name is Nompita Mona. I'm with the Nelson Mandela Bay Business Chamber in Port Elizabeth. Having traveled to Rwanda last week and just seeing what they're doing and how you get access to the country, what they do with that convention bureau, because we actually had meetings with them, and in terms of how they market themselves. I was just wondering, what is it that we can do as South Africa to really take the discussion around the visa specifically? Because $30 at the airport, no questions asked, You get your visa, and then you're out of the country whenever you need to be out. So, and when we discussed a few other issues with them, because we're talking investment promotion and also just getting them to come this side, and they said the first thing is your visa regulations. They're extremely onerous, even to us as Africans, and also they've got something they do with the region, where you don't actually even need a visa with their own neighbors in that side, or at that side of the country. So what can we do beyond just talking at a conference? How can we take this forward to the people who will have to take a decision around at least the first 30 days of you having come into my country? You can get a visa quite easily.
It's down to you, Minister.
Well, I think the new biometrics is going to happen at the city at Cape Town International Airport will help for those frequent travelers. So once you've got your biometrics in, you can move in and out of the airport very easily, and that will certainly help. But the point is, can you please agitate government? We're not getting enough agitation by the private sector to push government. I mean, the power is in the people. This is a democracy. So we don't get enough from the private sector pressure. We need to be agitating the president. They need to understand, otherwise we as South Africans are going to get left behind while the rest of Africa is completely open for travel. We're so worried about our air travel. And it's in stark contrast to our open borders on the land. So I can't understand why we have such onerous visa regulations if we don't even really have border control. So it doesn't make sense, and I'm asking, please, I can't lobby on my own as much as I have subpoenaed the minister in my past. We have to do a lot more.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
I think on that note, I don't know if there's any burning questions, but I think we need to wrap up. Our time is up. I'd like to thank my panel. If there's any burning last comments, I'll give you an opportunity for that. Otherwise, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.